So in the Edit tab, it looks pretty familiar to most editors that you'll ever see. You've got your source window, your program window, if that's what you want to call it. I'm not, as I say, a DaVinci Resolve expert, so sorry if I've got those wrong, but you've got your media that you've brought in over here. This little column here is basically your sort of bins, and you can actually just toggle that off. So you can toggle all that off by pressing that. And essentially they've got this great feature in here called Smart Bins, which is very much like Final Cut Pro. You can add a bin based on certain metadata pool properties, and that will then sort of filter the clips. So for example, if some of these clips had the metadata and you typed in different metadata, you could actually start singling them out. Very, very cool. So we're ready to basically start bringing clips to work with. So let's just bring all of these clips onto the timeline. So just Shift Select to highlight them all, drag them down onto the timeline. Thank you very much. They're all ready to go. So very similar video, audio. Obviously there's no audio in this case, so we're just working with the raw video. And here we go. And you can see we've got a viewer up. We can start scrubbing. Look at that. I mean, you just can't get that flexibility in After Effects with that workflow. And in Premiere you can, but it's just clunky. And actually with Premiere's new proxy workflow, it's a little bit better. But I don't think that proxy workflow, because it's still the very first iteration of that technology, it just isn't quite there yet. So it's very, very close for a lot of things. But when I'm working with these raw files, I prefer to do it this way. So I've brought in all my clips, and let's say this clip over here, the end clip. Again, you can work with it. We've got very simple controls here, which again, hovering over it tells you what they do. If you're familiar with editors in any way, you'll start feeling very familiar with what these things do. So snapping, you've got linked selection. So if you're working with audio, you obviously can have that on. Markers, flags, and so forth. You can change the height, you can change the zoom level, all good stuff that you're probably very familiar with. And actually there's also shortcuts, which if you go to File, and I believe it's in Project Settings, you can actually come down to keyboard mapping, and you can actually map your keyboard to a different NLE, so your shortcuts that you're familiar with will occur, and you can actually see all these other keyboard shortcuts are there for you. So everything can be done with keyboard shortcuts if you're that kind of editor, and we can start working. So let's say you want to just browse around. Obviously you've got your basic normal edit mode, and you can actually drag in fades, you can trim clips, you can roll clips, you can delete selections, and do all the normal stuff that you would do. You can overwrite things. There you go, very, very cool. And I like the way that trimming kind of works in Resolve. Look, we just pinch that in, it's already cutting the other clip down, we're overlaying it. You can select the space, get rid of the space by just pressing delete. Very, very cool. Gone too far? Okay. The next one along that I want to show you is the trim tool, which is the keyboard shortcut T. The trim tool is very good. This is how I do all my trimming. So basically we've got a clip here that needs to be trimmed, because if we play through by pressing L, maybe it doesn't start straight away. What does the actual okay, so we start moving in. So let's say we want to set it there. We just simply hover over the end of the clip until just to the right of it, and it turns that way, and simply we drag. And what's great about the trim tool is a little bit like the magnetic timeline in Final Cut 10. It closes all of the space, and I believe that's called a ripple edit in a ripple trim in Premiere Pro. To be honest, I never really understood it very well in Premiere Pro, but the way that Resolve visualizes this ripple, it makes it very easy to understand. So we've just trimmed the beginning of the clip, and we've not left any space, which is good. So we're going to trim it along, and let's say the end of the clip comes in. Let's say it's there. Okay, so again, hover over just to the left of the edit point, right click when the icon turns up, sorry, left click when the icon turns up, drag it down, it will snap to the end because we've got snapping turned on, and we're trimmed. And then if you want to zoom in, so Command on a Mac, zoom in, I think it'll be Control on a PC, and your plus and minus buttons help you zoom in. And then you can again start trimming the next clip, and you'll see what's happening here. In terms of visualization, you can actually see how that clip is being moved along the timeline as I click and drag, which is really cool because you can actually visualize where that cut point's going to happen. And obviously, if you look up in the program window here, you can actually see, and you can then reassess that trim point later, and you can see where the beginning of the clip is and the end of the clip is like that. So it's a very, very handy way of trimming. And equally here, look, we're trimming and we're always closing the gap, which is great on a timeline. It saves you a step. You don't have to then go select, delete for all those clips that you leave, or kind of drag clips up till they snap against each other. And that's the way I do almost all my trimming. The only other tool that I really want to show you is the razor edit mode, which is keyboard shortcut B. And with that, essentially, it's just exactly what it is, really. It's a razor, it's a blade, so that's the way I remember the shortcut, B for blade. And let's say we want to go about here, and actually let's go here and say, oh no, this shot needs to be cut in the middle there. Great. Okay, so we've trimmed that one, and we've cut it into two. Go back to the trim tool. Maybe we're just going to trim the in, trim the out, and then we're happy with that clip. But what we've done there is created two clips. Although they've got the same file name, there's two separate clips there. And if you're delivering your media, your aerial media, for somebody else to then edit, there's a great section in the deliver page which is going to help us get all of these out as individual clips with brand new file names that still reference the old file names. So it's very, very helpful. Okay, so we've got ourselves sorted out here. We've got some trimmed clips. We're very happy with our edit. And incidentally, if you are going to go ahead and edit, so you're adding music or you're going to finesse your edit because you're doing the edit yourself, do it here in Resolve, because you've got the ability to work with all your media. You can trim and edit, you can add music, you can add your titles, you can add graphics effects, you can put everything else in there that you really want to, and then go straight out. And the great thing is about this whole workflow is that you don't have this step where once you've trimmed or you've worked with one frame in After Effects, and you've then got to export all of your frames to your ProRes or DNx HD sort of codec of choice. You've then got another period of waiting. So here, the only period of waiting that we've had so far is that we've come out of Cinelight, which has taken a while, we've come straight into Resolve, and we are working with our footage, we're editing, and that's where a big speed improvement's coming up, because we're not waiting that extra time for all our clips just to be able to really start editing them. Plus, we also have the facility within DaVinci Resolve to work with keyframes, use power windows, and all sorts of good stuff in the color tab, which we're going to jump into next. And that's something else, again, that with After Effects, because you're only working on that first frame, a lot of the time with aerial shots, they'll start off framed a particular way and composed and exposed a particular way, and then it will change over time, because the nature of an aerial shot is that it develops, it evolves over time, and you maybe sort of start looking more at the sky, at the buildings and the horizon, and you pan down to follow a car. The exposure and the settings of that shot are going to change dramatically, so you can't really get all your exposure settings right for the first frame and then expect it to be right later on. And the way of going back in Adobe After Effects to tweak that very last frame maybe that needs to be different, and then have all of the keyframes in between sort of level themselves out, it's just very cumbersome and very tweaky, and it's not a way I recommend. So as I say, DaVinci Resolve is the best way to do it, and we're going to continue with the workflow now by jumping into the color tab.